We're going to look at a couple of different things with this classification of matter packet or worksheet kind of packet. I'm not going to go through all the different answers for every single one because I'm going to do that in class, but I'm going to kind of look at some different sections that were causing us some problems. So first we're going to look at is some of these pictures, okay, and then helping to tell us whether we have a pure substance or a mixture, whether a compound or an element, and then where the term molecule comes into play. And then we'll eventually look at the different types of mixtures and some things with those. So we're going to kind of take these shapes, and I'm going to draw my own little example here with these different shapes that you were looking at for this particular thing. So if we start off with matter in general, okay, let's remember that matter is one of two different types. Okay, you either have a pure substance or you have a mixture. All right. So if I start there, all right, so if I've got matter, and we're going to split that into either a pure substance or a mixture, okay? Now, if you have a pure substance, you either have an element or have a compound, okay? So we either have an element or compound, okay? And now elements, all right, we had a couple of these, can be a single one, like you had a single triangle there as one of the examples. That would be a formula of T, okay? Or you can have an element, I believe you had one like this where it was two squares. Those are both elements because they are the same type of atom. So you gotta be careful here with our terms. These are both atoms, all right? All of these little ones here, that's each individual one is an atom, all right? And they are both elements, okay? If you have a compound has to be two different elements or atoms bonded together. So I could have one like that. You also have one like a triangle and a couple of circles and a square or something like that. Okay, those are all compounds. All right, they are different elements put together. The part you have to be careful with is the molecule part. All right. Now, molecules mean you have to be bonded. Okay, so they have to be bonded together, which means I can have this one right here, or I can have those two. Okay, molecules can be either two of the same or two or more different. They just have to be bonded together. Okay, compounds are a particular, like I said here. Okay, a compound has to be two or more different ones that are bonded together. So notice how this little guy here fits in both categories. He's both a molecule and specifically a compound. Okay, these are all pure substances. Pure substances are either elements or compounds, and you got to watch the term molecule when to use that term because it can be used for both an element and a compound. You got to be careful. Okay. Now, if we go to the other side, we talk about mixtures. Okay, a mixture needs to be a combination. So I can have a couple elements. I can have a couple of compounds. I can have a molecule, okay? You've got to have different things going on in there. Combinations of compounds, combinations of elements and compounds, okay? Molecules, whatever. You've got to have different items in there, okay? There are two types. Remember, you've got heterogeneous and homogeneous. You have the heterogeneous ones. Those are where you can pick out the little pieces. Homogeneous ones will look the same throughout, okay? So you have hetero and you have homogeneous ones. Okay. There are different types of the heterogeneous and homogeneous. Homogeneous ones are often called solutions. Okay. So you can always call these solutions. And I always do SOLN for solution. Okay. Heterogeneous ones, you can have suspensions or you can have colloids. All right, so let's look at those in particular, the difference between kind of colloids, solutions, and suspensions, okay? Like I said, you can have different kinds of solutions. You can have a solid-solid solution, and the easiest one for that one would be like an alloy. So I have copper and zinc together to make brass. That's an alloy. That is a homogeneous mixture or a solution, okay? So think of solution more as another term for homogeneous, okay? Whereas there are different types of heterogeneous. So you can have suspensions, I can have colloids, and you can have just straight up a heterogeneous mixture with like pizza toppings, okay? So if I have a suspension, all right, a suspension is where you're going to have, think like really muddy river water It's going to have some stones at the bottom, and it's going to have some particles, okay? It'll look really cloudy for a long time, but if you let it sit and settle, it's going to settle out to its different parts. So you'd end up with all of this would come down there to the bottom, and you have a clear layer and like a layer of gravel and dirt. Okay, that is a suspension. They are suspended for a while until you let them sit. Okay, a colloid, on the other hand, okay, is heterogeneous, but it has really, really small particles. Okay, so a suspension has bigger particles that eventually settle out. A solution has really, 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 really small particles that mix right in and dissolve to make them homogeneous. Colloids are kind of in the middle. They are small particles that you usually can't see, but they are big enough that they scatter light. So, for example, I'll look up some pictures here online. Okay. This one here is an example of the Tyndall effect. Okay. If you look at the one on the left, that is a solution. Notice how the light's shining through. Okay, the light shines through and you don't see any beam there in the yellow. But if you look at the one on the right, notice how you can see that beam of light traveling through it. That's a colloid. Okay, it scatters the light. The easy one to think of there is your headlights when it's foggy out. That is a colloid. Okay, light that scatters in the middle of smoke. That's a colloid. Okay, there are many different types of colloids. Okay, they don't have to be a solution. Whipped cream is one. Foam is another. They have specific names. They're called aerosols or sols or emulsions. Okay, milk is an emulsion. All right, so they have some different terms that we're not going to really worry about. But if you shine light through it and you see the beam of light, that means that is a colloid. Okay, so solutions, suspensions, and colloids are kind of based on their different particle size. Suspensions have the biggest particles. Colloids have the ones in between. Solutions don't really have any particles that settle out because they're homogeneous. All right, so there are kind of three types there. Now, when you deal with a solution, okay, or a suspension or colloid, honestly, they don't have them too, but solutions in particular, you have either solute or solvent. Solutes are what you dissolve into something, okay? A solvent is what's doing the dissolving. I always think a solute is a smaller name than solvent. So the solute goes into your solvent. So a solute will go into a solvent. Okay, smaller amount solute, bigger amount solvent. All right, and you have the immiscible, miscible, and those are terms that only deal with liquids. Please do not try and tell me that something is immiscible if it's not two liquids. Okay. The only other thing I want to touch on is your periodic table. Okay, remember that with the periodic table, all right, I'm going to do my periodic table here. You got the little zigzag line. Okay, everything to the left is a metal. Everything to the right is a non-metal. Anything that touches that zigzag line is a metalloid. All right, that's really all the further we're going to get for right now with that. We'll do a lot more with that when we talk about the periodic table here in a few chapters.